ago, I heard the murmurings, right? You hear these tiny footprints of people that began to discuss civil war in this country. I laughed. I mocked the idea at the time. And you look at the makeup of the large urban centers today versus where the states actually lie. And then you look at the old line of the Civil War, not necessarily the Mason-Dixon, but you look at where Civil War once took place in the 1860s. And just as pure theory, hypothetical, say, okay, what if there was a Civil War today? Where would the line be? Well, there is no line, because again, you've got big cities all over the place, and you can't see anything like that happening. So if you look at the split today between the Democrats and the Republicans, I hear, right, whether it's on someone's podcast or whether it's on YouTube or whether it's an article, a lot of people today talk about the coming Civil War. Maybe that'll happen with a whimper. Maybe it'll happen. I don't think it'll happen with a bang myself. I think if anything happens, it'll happen with a whimper. And how would it break down, Vance? How would the country split? And I tend to think that if there was some degree of civil war, it would happen over basic freedoms, some sort of severing of those who believed in the Constitution and those who believe in some sort of neo-constitution. You and I could drink coffee for hours and hours, and we could debate on, again, what the geography would be of that breakdown. But I can honestly say, when someone talks about that, I no longer mock them or laugh, because if I project down the road far enough and I look what's going on in society today, again, moving away from the stake that our forefathers drove, which is the Constitution, I don't have any problem believing something could happen similar to some kind of civil war in the future. Just look around at all the other countries where this kind of thing has taken place. And you really have to wonder, Vance, look what's going on in Europe. They've got major demographic issues that are going to come to the fore by 2050 and beyond. It's going to happen. And they don't know what to do. They don't even want to talk about it. But it's right before our eyes.
Yeah, I get the sense that these trials that are happening, the Chauvin just finished up. There'll be Kyle Rittenhouse.
Oh man!
I think people believing that the politicians should get involved ahead of time and say that they know whether or not somebody should be guilty or not, and then creating this pressure within the society before the trial happens. And then having cities have to respond saying, we want to make sure that the population doesn't go and start rioting and have violence as a result of these. Like, if you start to decay the ability for people to feel like they're getting justice and to feel like the system is run by the angriest group of people, that is when you really have a problem. Because I've said this before on the podcast. My buddy that lived in Afghanistan, he said, what you Americans don't understand about Afghanistan is the people welcomed the Taliban in. And the reason that they welcomed the Taliban in is because our court systems had become so corrupt that no one could get justice. And so what they did was they found out there was a group of people that would come in and they would settle all of our disputes. And if somebody stole from you, or if somebody, lied or didn't deliver on what they were supposed to, they meted out justice. And when you live in a society that you can't get justice, you're willing to turn to some really dark people in order to get it. And that frightens me, because I think you're right. It probably will start out like a whimper. But when people feel like Lady Justice isn't blind, or that scale is somehow uneven, they will do wild things.
Right. Abhorrent things. And, my opinion of human nature already, Vance, which is pretty dank. And when you unleash the beast and you allow people to participate in mob rule, you are headed to hell. No other destination. Someone has to hold the line. And we, as free-thinking people that love liberty, genuine liberty, where we say to people, you deserve equality of opportunity, and that's it, right? No equality of outcome, nothing like that. We have to consistently state these things. And sometimes I think we're at the point now where, as individuals, we feel like, Lord, I'm just going to put on a sandwich board that just says the word freedom on it and march around. Something like that, because our politicians have certainly failed us. You ought to see the pack of politicians in Mississippi. I mean, you're talking about tits on a bull. And I know that other states are in the same boat, where you just have a network, or you cycle the same ones through. And they tell you what you want to hear. And once they get into office, they jump ship. This is the pattern. That's the template that they follow. It's just to call it scary, Vance, to call it frightening is not enough. Again, I would love to throw my hands up, man, and say, I'm just going to do my thing. I'm just going to go to work and keep my head below the parapet. I'm not going to peek over. But I have a son and I have a daughter. And if the Lord blesses me, I will have grandchildren someday. And it's not good enough for me simply to go along. I hope it's not good enough for the rest of free, loving, thinking Americans, regardless of whether you in Iowa or Mississippi or California, wherever you are. The common thread of liberty runs through us all as Americans. And it doesn't run through other countries in the same manner. You know, I know, Vance, that if me and you began to write our definition of freedom down on a piece of paper, your definition and mine would be very similar by the time we got to the end. But if you take someone that's in Saudi Arabia, for example, or Iraq or Vietnam, you ask them for their definition of freedom, you're going to get something entirely different. And I don't want to live by their definition of freedom.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because the other day I saw that the province of Ontario shut down their border from the other provinces. So if you're living in Manitoba, even if you're vaccinated, you can't come into Ontario. You can only if you're a healthcare worker or certain sorts of supply transport. And so I am completely outraged by this. You know, to me, this is like, we've crossed the Rubicon. You've shut down your what equivalent the Canadian state borders. You shut that down. So something big has happened. So I write my Canadian friends, and I'll let them be anonymous for now, but people that I know, that the listeners would know. And I was like, oh man, I feel terrible for you guys. This is awful. Like, you must be outraged. And they're like, nah, that's okay. We got to solve the problem. We got to get this thing. And that's when I started realizing, like, Canada is not America Junior. Canada is a different country. They have a different way of looking at things. And their view of freedom is kind of like ours. But, like, I think of shutting states down as, like, go time, right? Like we have had a really serious change of scenarios in which you're not allowed to have free movement throughout the country. This is not good. And so that brings me back to it is special in what we have here, or at least what we had here. I'm not entirely convinced that we're not just play acting what it's like to be in a free country, because we've gone so long without being in it. You know, like anybody that lives in corporate America knows what it's like to have a set of unwritten rules that you have to follow in order to be able to survive and do well in that company. And I think that's what's probably going on in the country as a whole. Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.